Okay, welcome everybody. My name's Trent, and today I'm going to be leading the mini workshop for our organization, and we're going to talk about psychological safety and why that is so important as a leader for your team development. First, I'm going to go through our agenda. So we're going to do a little bit of a introduction. I know some people are uncomfortable speaking, but we got to break that silence and get you used to one another. And we're going to do a little icebreaker, and then we're going to get into some personal reflection. And my hope is when we get to the personal reflection, that you're comfortable sharing your experiences so that we can all learn from each other. Once we go through our personal reflection, we'll go into Amy Edmondson's definition of psychological safety. We'll discuss a little bit more about some shared experiences and how they relate to Amy Edmondson's definition of what psychological safety is. And then I'm going to give you some tools or some strategies of that you can implement within your organization as a leader to not only understand your team's level of psychological safety, but also some things that you can do as a leader to implement to hopefully increase the trust and psychological safety within your team. And then we'll wrap it up with time for questions, maybe some comments. And if you would please do a quick survey for me because it always helps me as a facilitator to get feedback from you. So, a little bit of housekeeping rules before we get started. When you are sharing your stories in order to keep everything anonymous, if you need to use a name, then please use fictitious names, and don't degrade or put someone down that others may know within the organization. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started unless I have any questions over what we're going to talk about and how we're going to do it. Um, we'll go ahead and get moving to the next part. Is everyone good? All right. So I will go ahead and do my introduction first to go ahead and break the ice. I've already said my name is Trent, and I will go into two truths and a lie. So my three things are that I have been to Antarctica, that I have five kids and two dogs, and that my favorite football team is the Washington Commanders. When we get to the end, we'll go through and see if we can figure out which were truths and which were lies. So with that being said, I am going to pass the popcorn over to the next person. When that person goes, you will then pass the virtual popcorn on to the next person, so on and so forth until we're all done. So I am virtually going to pass the popcorn over to Bridget.
Thank you, Trent. Hi, everybody. I'm Bridget. My two truths and a lie. I have been in active tornado. I have 12 brothers and sisters, or I'm one of 12 brothers and sisters. And I played varsity softball in high school and gave lessons in college as a job.
Thank you, Bridget. Who would you like to pass the popcorn to next?
I will pass the popcorn to Lori.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lori. So let's see. I was born in Canada and I have dual citizenship. Um, I wanted to be a sumo wrestler when I was a child, and today's my son's birthday. And I'm going to pass it to Tatiana.
Hi everyone. So my two truths and a lie are I prefer taking a train over a flight. I prefer white chocolate over milk chocolate. I like to watch movies on my laptop. And I'm passing it over to Josh.
Hi, everyone. My name's Josh. I think I'm the last one to go. So, my two truths and a lie. I've been married for 16 years. I have lived in Italy and I love taking cruises.
All right.
Pass the popcorn back to you, Trent.
All right. Thank you. So what we're gonna do now is we can all like at any time we can try to guess what was true and what was a lie. Or if we want to just guess what the lie was for the sake of brevity, we can do that as well. So who thinks they know which one of mine was a lie?
Trent,
Is it
you had 5 kids? Is that what you said in your? So I think that's the lie.
That is not the lie.
Oh, wow.
I have I have 3 kids of my own and 2 stepsons.
Okay.
The lie was that I have been to Antarctica.
I was right.
Hmm.
Let's see. Bridget, you went next. Does anybody want to guess? Tatiana.
The lie, I think the lie is that you've been in an active tornado.
not a lie?
I think it's the
Oh
12
wow.
brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
It is the 12 brothers and
I
sisters.
did not hear her say 12.
That's 1900 stuff.
All right. I think who went next? Lori? Is it really? I think that is not your son's birthday today.
It actually is my son's birthday today.
Oh man.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Birthday.
22 today.
Oh, wow.
Um, so my lie was I was born in Canada and have dual citizenship.
Wow.
And yes, I did want to be a sumo wrestler when I was a kid.
Hey,
That's so cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
chase your dreams.
Yeah.
Who was next? I think Tatiana was next.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
does it, oh, I'm sorry. Were you talking, Bridget? Were you getting ready to go?
Oh no, I was thinking, but I can that maybe you don't prefer white chocolate over milk chocolate.
That's actually true.
Okay.
The lie was I prefer taking a train over a flight.
Okay.
And let's see, Josh. Who wants
Mhm.
to crack it at what Josh's lie was?
I think his cruise is a lie. He said that he likes to cruise.
It's a lie.
I heard him say he lived in Europe. It is a lie?
That is a
Okay.
lie. I prefer not to be on the water for too long.
Yeah.
Not for days or weeks at a time. A day, okay, but not for a week.
Yeah.
All right, so that's our introduction and icebreaker. I hope that everyone enjoyed that, and I hope that here in the next few slides you may see um, a connection as to why I chose that as our icebreaker for today. And then when we get to the end, hopefully, if we have time, I'll ask if you may have a idea of why I chose this as the icebreaker based on the topic that we're going to be talking about today. All right, so for today, we're going to use Slido as part of our presentation. If you have not used Slido before, it's a really fun way, an interactive way that you can either in person or virtually get participants to share their thoughts and ideas and see what everyone's feedback is. So you can go ahead and scan the QR code from this screen, or it's also going to be on the next screen when I get to that. So please have your phone ready and just give me a thumbs up when you're ready to go. All right, I got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So in a few short words, how would you describe psychological safety? And there is no expectation for you to be an expert at this point, right? I'm asking you this before we get to the actual definition so that we can do some compare and contrast. Okay, I see some really good answers here. So, feeling safe to express ideas and concerns, being able to take interpersonal risk without negative consequences, being able to speak freely without judgment. I like that. Intellectual security. So, I'm going to pick one or two of these out, and we'll just try to give. And it doesn't have to be the one that you wrote. It could be one that somebody else wrote that maybe you have an idea of where they were getting at. But um, I really want to hone in on the negative consequences. So if I were to say psychological safety is being able to take risk without negative consequences, can somebody give me maybe some ideas of what negative consequences could be?
I think sometimes like a negative consequence can be if somebody says something to make you feel like what you said was stupid or it didn't make sense. Yeah, it's
Right. So especially today we're talking about team effectiveness, right? So if somebody within that team was on the receiving end of that, how likely do you think they would be in the future to bring up new ideas or maybe even call out things that they may think are wrong? What would, if that were you, what would your kind of inclination be going forward?
And would be to not participate. Because I mean, you're being judged and probably in front of other people as well, so there's an embarrassment factor that is in there, and that judgment piece is pretty difficult, especially when there's that social capital that you probably feel like you lose when that happens.
Like you're losing face within your team, right? Like these people don't respect what I have to say or think that I don't know what I'm talking about. What do we think intellectual security? That may be the first time I've seen that one, but I'll like the answer, but I would like to get your feedback on what you feel like intellectual security is. Does it kind of maybe tie into what we were just saying, does someone think there may be differences as well?
It could mean something similar, but I think just feeling like your ideas and what you have to offer and what you're bringing to the table um, is valid, and that others respect your ideas and your opinions. So I think it ties in, but focusing more on just um, you know people acknowledging and respecting your ideas.
Okay. So with that, thank you so much for participating. And if that was your first time using Slido, I hope that you enjoyed that. And it's a tool that can be used if you want to use it within your teams. It's pretty easy to figure out. And if you ever have questions about how to use it going forward, then please reach out to me and I can help you out with that. We're going to talk a little bit about Amy Edmondson, and I like to refer to Amy Edmondson as the founder of psychological safety, if you will. And we saw what we were talking about in the Slido on the slide previous to this one, but if you'll take a chance just to read through the definition from her, or not necessarily from her, but it was from an author on Harvard Business Review that was referencing Dr. Edmondson's book. So read through this definition, and then we're going to do some comparing and contrasting to the Slido that we just did previously to see where there are similarities and where there may be some differences. I see some similarities already. Who wants to be the brave soul and come off of mute and maybe give some similarities first, and then I'll ask someone else for maybe some differences that he see. Tatiana.
Thank you. Some of the similarities that I noticed are the risk taking and asking questions and sharing ideas. Like we just spoke about the intellectual security, and then the negative consequences that you can have when you speak up or when you share your ideas. So I think that those are two similarities from the answers that we provided.
And do you think we did a pretty good job in the Slido, not knowing what the definition was coming up? Do you think we did a pretty good job of capturing it?
I do. I do.
I think so too. I would give us all a A plus. All right. So Bridget, if I can pick on you for 1 second, if if I were to ask you maybe some differences that you see in this definition compared to maybe what some of our thoughts and ideas were.
Yeah, I think one thing we didn't touch on was being able to admit mistakes without fear. So we talked about the intellectual security, and feeling comfortable with what we have to offer. But I think thinking about it from a perspective of when maybe you don't do something right, and being comfortable to speak out about that and admit that is a difference in something to which it makes sense and something to think about.
Absolutely. And we'll start there. And I really enjoyed and appreciate your response. So Amy Edmondson talks about failure being the opportunity for organizations and teams to grow. And as leaders, if we don't give our team space to fail, then they're never going to take those risks and they will always settle for the status quo because of that fear, right? The fear, like we talked about before, of putting themselves out there and trying to create new ideas and be innovative and maybe even question a colleague or their manager if they see something that's not right. If we don't create the environment for that, then we're basically stifling our teams, right? To reach the full potential that they that we want them to be able to reach, right? So now I want to have one of you. We're just going to do one example of maybe a team or a situation or a workplace that you were in that did not have psychological safety. And we're going to go through these 3 questions that follow. And then on the next slide, we're going to talk about an example from one of you that a team or a workplace that you feel like your team did have psychological safety and what that meant. So we'll be able to compare those 2 things. And this is the opportunity for you to be vulnerable and share your experience so that others can learn, right? That's what we're all here to do, is become better leaders and increase the effectiveness of our team. So I will say, like I mentioned before, if you are going to use names, then please use fictitious names or just choose not to use names at all. But be be as open with sharing as you can so that we can all learn from one another. So I'll give you like time to read the slide real quick, and then I'll ask for a volunteer that would want to go. Okay, do I have anyone that wants to jump in first?
I can jump in if you
Gosh,
should be okay, Trent.
thank you.
I actually, have a couple that I was rolling around in my mind, and one that actually happened recently that wasn't kind of team oriented. It was more me oriented, but I do have one that was team oriented that I can bring up. And this was a few years ago, and kind of the boss, kind of the overall boss. He was very structured. He was very kind of, I would say, he followed rules very rigidly. And I'm a psychologist, and part of my job is to take it, let's just say an emergency walk-in whenever they come into the clinic. But the problem was, so on that day, I had this is kind of military specific, but on that day, I also had a dental appointment. And the rule was that if you miss an appointment, then like you get in lots of trouble, lots and lots of trouble. And I was all set to go to it. And then lo and behold, we had an emergency walk-in, and I was the person that was on call that day. And the individual was at risk of harming themselves. So lots of things that are going on that you have to kind of wrap around and insulate and ensure that you're taking care of this individual. And so I those types of encounters take a long time usually. And lo and behold, I missed my appointment, right? And this individual basically called me out in front of every single person that I work with and made and accompanied me to the appointment, stood there while I was at the appointment. And I got in a ton of trouble for it. And the issue is, because I'm looking at these questions here, um, there was no perspective or context because he was so rigid and he followed the rules so specifically, which there's a reason for that. But he followed the rules so specifically, and so he was so cemented in what the rules were that if you miss an appointment, you get in a lot of trouble. That there's no thought or thought outside the context of what happens in the gray, if you will, of an individual when there's things outside their control and they're taking care of something. In my mind, obviously, is a lot bigger than missing a dental appointment. And I think the root cause of it is just that cemented focus on, well, the rule book says this. So it doesn't matter what the issue is or what the context is. So there's no ambiguity offered, and I think when you're dealing in the human dynamic, you can't, if you have that frame of reference, then you're going to always run into issues where you don't take that context, that almost empathy, if you think about it in a way. It's almost a lack of empathy. And the team wasn't successful because nobody wanted to work with the person, especially the fellow people that I work with. After what happened to me, like nobody wanted to do anything with this individual, not even people who were motivated to work with him before, because I mean, they were able to take the context and nobody was motivated to do anything for the individual. I'll be honest with you. I was almost motivated to do the opposite. Because I get defensive. Who doesn't get defensive in a situation like that? So, I mean, that was a while back and I've learned a lot about it, but that was a tough time because I take my job seriously and I'm perfectly willing to miss a lot of things if somebody needs me to help get them to the right place so they don't harm themselves.
Absolutely. And me coming from the military before this role, I can 100% understand where you're coming from with that. Um, how could that situation, or like what approach could that leader you feel have taken in that moment to show you or the rest of the team for that matter that they were committed to the team's success and committed to being a leader that maybe understood their importance a little bit better?
Yeah, I have the benefit of hindsight, of course, right now, but still, I think just taking the perspective of someone else. When I think about psychological safety, that's what I think about. Is yes, there's a way, there's a parameters of work, and he had parameters of work, and I have parameters of work. But if you can't look outside that to see that there are extenuating circumstances, it's almost like if you were to, it's analogous to raising kids. You can be very, very structured, but they're not going to always listen to you. And you have to be able to kind of spread a little bit. You don't have to break rules, but you have to take the perspective because we're all different. And I think if he would have taken the perspective that he had the situation you were in and other people might be in, because I mean he was a person that was in charge of a lot of different medical um, specialties, like emergency physicians. I mean, you can't help if a gunshot wound comes in, you can't just leave the emergency room to go to an appointment or make the phone call. I'm not thinking about a phone call at that time. So I think just taking that perspective would have showed a lot of grace to myself and just to everybody that was aware of the situation.
I want to ask everyone else to share like a full example, but I do want the three other participants to just to say, have you known a leader that may be like the one that Josh is mentioning? And if so, what was the Was the outcome that Josh mentioned very similar to maybe what you have experienced?
Yeah, I had a supervisor that would, if you didn't agree with her opinions or her thoughts, then she would call you out in front of everybody and like question why you don't agree with her and how she's right and you're wrong. And she would do this to a lot of people. And then there were times that she would make people actually like apologize to her in front of like the whole team. So at that point, the whole team just kind of like shut down. Like everybody dreaded having meetings with this person. Nobody wanted to speak up or talk. Nobody wanted to volunteer for anything. So the team just really kind of like just shut down and just stopped collaborating and becoming, they didn't collaborate with each other.
Did you see a lot of turnover or bad engagement surveys or things like that in your situation, Lori?
Yes, actually, several people had made a pact to all try to quit at the same time. So we had like a group of people all quit. Um, and then the ones that were still there had to kind of clean up. And luckily, that supervisor ended up leaving. So, that kind of helped the situation.
Okay. Thank you so much, Josh and Lori, both for sharing. Now we're going to change gears and get to a little bit more of a positive note. I want a volunteer, please, to talk about a time that they may have been on a team that did have psychological safety and what was that like? We'll go through a few of the questions here. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer to share their experience, please.
At a previous employer, I was started an organization that as soon as I started, the leader that was within that organization quit. And it was like a smaller team, so it was a little bit like, okay, what does this mean for me? Because I just started, the executive just quit. Um, and the person that came in, she uh, she was fantastic, and took the time to really understand, what we were there to do, what our roles were, and she just fostered an environment of talk to me about what it is that you're doing, what do you want your career path to look like, just very open conversation, which provided just a space where you could go to her if you did have ideas, you didn't feel like you couldn't talk to her about it. But something that's interesting though too is that when you have those kind of relationships, and even though that's your situation, that's your work environment at that time, those type of relationships stick with you, and it fosters that kind of confidence in that being able to have that mentality when you go to other organizations. And so I know we're talking about the positive because on the flip side, you can have the same, which has been experienced too, right? That can carry over. But and she's been one of my mentors, and I use her as a reference, and she helped lead me to other opportunities beyond that organization. So it was a really great experience, and what started as a little nervous and a rocky situation at a new job turned into just a really great experience where I felt like, I was heard and valued. So
And in your
that's
example, and what I'm hearing from your example was the psychological safety of the team really all came from that leader and the presence.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. And I think a lot of that is it's learned behavior too, because she set that precedence and she set that, that was the expectation for her. She led by example, and how she presented herself and what she fostered as values within the team. Keeping in touch with several of those team members, now they are great, great colleagues to other individuals or great leaders. And I think a lot of that can come from your leadership.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Well, as
Yeah.
we transition into this next slide, I will ask you, because we see the benefits of psychological safety, and we talked about yours from your personal example, but would you say you agree with these on the slide? Did you see this in your example of your team that had high psychological safety?
Absolutely. Yes.
So I have seen it as well. So when we're doing engagement surveys, those teams that have that feeling of psychological safety, their engagement scores are going to be higher. There's going to be reduced turnover within the team. So the cost of rehiring someone else, the organization is not going to have to front that money, right? Productivity and innovation. If you're giving your employees the safe space to think and innovate and come up with new ideas, they're going to be much happier in the role that they're doing, and they're going to actually enjoy coming to work and being a part of the organization. And they're going to be more um, prone to want to learn more, right? There's a lot of um, research that shows organizations that have psychological safety, the employees take it upon themselves to want to enroll in post-secondary education or get more certifications or cross-train in other areas because it just gives them energy to be on a team that has that kind of environment, right? And last but not least, the absenteeism. I mean, if you as a manager, how many things are you juggling throughout the day, right? Glass balls and rubber balls, and I can't let this hit the ground. Well, you need all of your people on your team. And teams with higher levels of psychological safety, they take off work less. And it's not because the boss is saying you're not having vacation or you're not, you've taken all your sick days. It's because they actually want to be there because they believe in what the organization is doing. All right.
Can I mention something? Because the description I provided of the event that I had was the antithesis of that, right?
Right.
People actually got into more trouble because they wanted to kind of go against that person. So they would not show up. They wouldn't go to different events because they just despised it. So they ended up getting into more trouble.
Thank you so much, Josh. And for the sake of time, I'm going to go through this next portion relatively quickly because we're right up on time. But I am going to provide you with copies of this slide deck. And as you all know, you know where my office is. If you want me to come do these types of activities with your team, then I'm more than willing to do so. Or if you want to use me as a resource and a reference and that you could run these types of workshops within your team, then I can teach you how to set this up as well. So this really quickly is 7 questions that comes from Harvard Business Review on questions you can include in an employee engagement survey to gauge the level of psychological safety within your teams. And I normally pair these up with a Likert scale, so you can do it on a scale of 1 to 5, and the employee answers 5 for really strongly agree, or all the way down to 1, very much disagree. And then that will allow you to see where you have areas within your team that you need to improve your psychological safety in order to realize all those benefits that we just talked about, right? And here's some things that you can do as a leader to improve how you're engaging within your teams. These are just 4 quick examples. There is not an exhaustive list, right? But are you establishing clear expectations within your team, or is everything kind of all over the place, right? This month, this is the expectation. Next month, that may change. That's what a lot of times drives employees to be frustrated and throw their hands up. Are you inviting your employees to share their opinion, or are you shutting it down, right? And when they do share their opinion and especially in a public forum, show that you appreciate the vulnerability and them taking the risk to share their thoughts and ideas, especially in a group, because that will spark others to feel comfortable to do the same. practice active listening. If you get to a place where that you feel like you already know the answer to what the employee is asking, then you're already missing the mark, right? Every situation and every employee is different, and they have a different perspective. And you know, going into a situation thinking that you already know the answer to the question they're going to ask, or you already know better than the idea that they're bringing up, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And last but not least, show some vulnerability, right? As a leader, you will be surprised how much respect you can get from your employees within your team just by saying sometimes like, hey, I might not have the answer to this right now, but I have a team that is very good at their jobs, and I'm asking you for input on how you think we should solve this problem together, right? And I guarantee you, taking that approach, you'll get so much buy-in from your team. So I will leave you with this. Take these four recommendations and develop your own plan to how you would implement some of these steps to increase the psychological safety within your team. All right, we have like 60 seconds left. So if you want to scan the QR code and take the survey, please, please, please do that. And I just want to ask really quick before we run out of time, who thinks they know why we use two truths and a lie for the icebreaker?
Sir, to show vulnerability and being able to open up to one another.
Being able to open up, right? And if you can open up with your team, you'll increase that level of psychological safety. So I'm going to stop sharing. I appreciate it. And I will stop recording